An unwise jealousy to deprive a man of his natural liberty upon the supposition he may abuse it. George Washington.
They who would give up an essential liberty for temporary security deserve neither liberty or security. Benjamin Franklin.
The Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It is an instrument for the people to restrain the government, lest it come to dominate our lives and interests. Patrick Henry.
America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it would be because we destroyed ourselves. Abraham Lincoln.
I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. Thomas Jefferson.
Property is surely a right of mankind as real as liberty. John Adams.
The Constitution is the guide which I never will abandon. George Washington.
Transmissions will resume. I try to keep us all down and hope that we will never see the truth around. Another promise, another scene, another package like to keep us trapped in greed. All green belts wrapped around our minds, and endless red tape to keep the truth confined.
Oh yeah, we will be victorious. I know, because I read the last chapter of the last book. Welcome to Patriot's Met, folks. Whew, a little bit hot there. My name is Joshua Bennett. I have a very good friend of mine here today with us, Mr. Claudio Gomez. Claudio?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for being here today. And more than that, we have a very special guest, one of my favorite guests. She's been with us a couple times. Not enough, I have to say. Miss Becky Akers, who is a champion of liberty, who says it like it is, who tears the NSA, the TSA, whatever. If it's the government, she's going to tear into it. You can see her work almost daily on Lou Rockwell blog, LouRockwell.com. And I found the best way to catch up with her is just Google her name, Becky Akers, Akers. And she is with us again today, thankfully. She's giving her time to us. So, Becky, are you there?
I'm here, and I thank you very much for such a kind and very generous introduction, Josh, and the $100,000 I promised you for that will be on its way to you.
Right. Oh, Becky, we were talking earlier, but we've had a lot of really nice guests from the Mises Institute, the Ron Paul Institute, this and that. But I've not gotten any better feedback, people saying, please get this person back on, than when you were on.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you so much. I think that people really have, or let me qualify that. I think some people, some Americans, really have an insatiable desire for liberty anymore. It's unfortunate that so much of American life is anti-freedom. So much of what we hear, so much of what we see and read is anti-freedom. And that's a real tragedy for all of us. I think probably a lot of people are in my situation. We long for the untrammeled freedom that the Creator gave us just by virtue of our humanity. We want to live our own lives. We want to be in charge of our own fates. We want to take responsibility for our decisions, good or bad. We don't want tyrannical politicians and bureaucrats who are so corrupt, who are so inept, who can't live their own lives, yet they're daring to try to live ours for us. This is just unconscionable, and all of us need to stand firm against it.
Absolutely. It's so sad to me, because I love history, and we're going to get into history because you have written about history with a couple of wonderful books that I love, but it just boggles my mind how far we've come with our heritage of liberty just only 200 years ago. I mean, the United States, America is so young, and it's so sad how far we've gone from what was revolutionary, and I don't mean as in a shooting war, but revolutionary in the thought process with liberty and freedom and like you said, taking control of our own lives that our God gave us. And I think I loved what Gary North said about it. And it was so great because I actually argued with someone about self-ownership, and he said, no, you don't own yourself, God owns you. And I said, okay. And then Gary North wrote an article where he said, sure, God owns you, and he gave you the sovereignty or the stewardship of your own life. And we had that for a little bit, 11 years from the Declaration to the Constitution. I wish I could go back there. But then how far we've dropped, how far we've come to just being, it's just horrible.
Yes.
I don't know. And you live over there. You live on the East Coast, correct?
Well, yeah, unfortunately. But I often have the same reaction you do, Josh. When I was researching my novels, they're both set during the American Revolution, so I immersed myself in that period, even trying to concoct some 18th century foods. And my husband will tell you, not a good period in culinary history. But aside from that, immersing myself in that culture, reading journals and letters, trying to think the way those people did. And it was actually not all that difficult for me because I seem to have been born loving liberty. It's always driven me, the quest to be free, the quest to be, not under the thumb of some corrupt bureaucrat or politician. From the first I can remember, I was always after that sort of freedom. So reading the founders, reading ordinary people who lived through that time, their thoughts in their journals and letters, I felt that I'd come home. I felt I really belonged there. Then to jerk back into the 21st century, it's just obscene almost. And human nature, of course, we all know, does not change. We are as flawed and sinful as we were thousands of years ago. The only thing different about us is the way we talk and dress. But there are some thought processes, I think, too, that have changed over the last couple hundred years. Americans in the 18th century really valued freedom. They talked about freedom, and they revered freedom the way politicians today talk about democracy. Okay, now we all know democracy is not freedom. Democracy is nothing more than mob rule. The 18th century understood that too. They were after true freedom. They wanted to live free of politicians and bureaucrats, okay? They wanted to be free of government. They were pretty much anarcho-capitalists, all right? What drives Americans now seems to be, how much can I live off my neighbor? How easy can I have it? Can I get my neighbors to pay for my doctor? Can I get my neighbors to pay my rent? Can I get my neighbors to buy my food for me? I don't care that this is outright theft. If I can find a bunch of corrupt politicians and bureaucrats who will hold up my neighbors, who will hold them at gunpoint and force them to pay all my bills, that's what my life's going to be about. I'm going to exert every effort I can to pull that off. So there does seem to be a real fundamental difference now between Americans in the 21st century and 18th century Americans. I blame a lot of this on progressivism, blame a lot of it on Marxist philosophy, which of course is, progressivism is just an offspring of Marxism. But it seems to have invaded every area of our society. You hear this in churches.
Yeah.
I actually attended a church where the guy made some pitch for how the church now would help people fill out their food stamp applications. And I thought, are you serious? You haven't. This is a Bible-believing, gospel-preaching church. And I thought, you have seriously left behind Christ's commission that we, the church, are to provide for the poor? You are seriously turning your back on that and helping people rob their neighbors with cover of legality to it? I mean, this is just tragic. And then we wonder why the American church is not making any inroads on this culture.
Wow. Yeah, I a couple Sundays ago, church that I attend, which I love everyone there, and we got to watch a recruitment video from the Navy SEALs.
Oh, my.
It just was, what?
Come kill for Jesus, everyone.
Yes.
Come kill for Jesus.
That's Matthew 5 all the way across. Blessed are the warmongers.
That would be it, yes. My Bible actually rendered that a little different. It said peacemakers, but what did the translators know? So,
well, that's probably what it is. Just a difference in translation.
That's it, yeah. But, the church should be leading us, and of course in the 18th century, pastors did lead their congregations in paths of righteousness and freedom. The two are very closely intertwined. If we are concerned with robbing folks, if we are concerned with sponging off of them and tricking or forcing them into giving us their money, their wealth, their efforts so that we can live more easily, then we have left righteousness behind. We don't know what we're talking about. The Lord says if you don't eat, if you don't work, you don't eat. There's never anything in the Bible about it's okay to be a sponge. We're supposed to bear each other's burdens, yes, but we're also supposed to bear our own burden. So this drive from so many Americans and from so many churches that it's perfectly all right to live off the general dole, this is satanic, and it leads us to dependency on mere men instead of our dependency on the Lord. So we need to scotch this every chance we get.
Yeah, it's pretty sad when I think we talked about this last time that you were on with this, like how far we've come from in Boston in particular, when you had the Sons of Liberty, Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty to Boston 2 years ago, where they were basically put under martial law and USA, USA
yes.
was the chant. And it just boggled my mind. Where were the Sons of Liberty? How far is that? And I'm not on the East Coast, but is there anyone there that loves liberty? I mean, I know you're there, and the guys from the Mises Institute aren't very far away, and Ron Paul's not very far away, but what's happened?
I'll tell you what, Josh. I actually am in a very enviable position for being someone who loves freedom and yet living on the East Coast. I write all day long, so I'm in front of my computer and I'm not out with people. The only break I really take from that is I play classical piano and I practice at my church. So in the afternoons, I walk down to church and practice for several hours and then walk home again. Now, nobody's at church, so I'm by myself. And that's my point. I'm pretty much by myself all day long. When I get out into New York City, I usually do not take public transit in New York. This last weekend I had to, and it was an eye-opening experience, an adventure, as it always is. I look around at people on the subways and the buses, and I look at them and I try to imagine the thoughts in their heads. I seldom ever see anyone that strikes me as this person would really love liberty. Most people are just, you know what, I'm really depressed about the state of our society on top of everything else. I mean, now, I draw a big distinction in my thinking between government, which is the realm of force, the realm of politicians and bureaucrats, the realm of forcing other people to knuckle under and do what you want them to do, even when it's against their best interests. That's politics. And society, which is the realm of voluntary interaction. I think our society has degenerated so much, our relationships with each other. Just looking around at the way people dress anymore, it is so obvious they have no self-respect. And if you don't have any self-respect, you're not going to have respect for others either. I was just astonished when I got on the trains last weekend. People look as though they haven't bathed. Now, I'm sure they have, but they just look grungy and dirty. They're dressed in rags. Now, these are not poor people. You know, these are not beggars on the street. These are other people riding the subway with me on a weekend. And they're probably going to parties or whatever, going out for dinner with their friends, and they look like they stepped out of Goodwill. And I think if you have no more respect for yourself than to come out looking like that, where's your respect for me? Why are you letting me see you that way? You clearly don't have any respect for me either. The women, they look like prostitutes. They are painted up like tarts. They have skirts on that don't cover anything. Their midriffs are bare. Now, not so much last weekend, but in the summer, as I walk down to church to practice, that's what I'm going to see. I'm going to see almost naked people in New York City. And believe me, these are not lift-toned bodies either, okay? I'm aghast at this. And it's like, if this is all the respect you have for yourself, it's no wonder you don't want liberty. Now, if I start talking to any of these people, and if I were to try to steer the conversation onto freedom, I would get the most bizarre looks. People in New York City and on the East Coast in general no longer have any idea what you're talking about when you say liberty. Another phenomenon in New York, Josh, and you probably don't have this in Alaska, but I can go out onto a New York City street and walk along, and sooner or later, somebody is going to stop me for some campaign or other, okay? It could be one for kids. You know, we're trying to raise money for UNICEF or something like that. Or it can be, a lot of times what's going on is questionnaires with a clipboard and a pen, and they'll act like they're going to take down your opinion. They're really not. They're just there to propagandize you, but they're there on behalf of getting more, quote, rights for sodomites, okay? I will often say to these people, okay, so you want more rights for somebody who is proud of the fact that he's perverted. What about my liberty? What about my liberty to have nothing to do with him? They can't even respond. They are so dumbfounded. Okay? If I see somebody who's out campaigning for a politician, as I often do, and they stop me, I have the same question. What has he done for my liberty? You know, they'll start running through all the stuff this politician has done, all the pork he's got in New York City. And I'll interrupt them. But what has he gotten for my liberty? How has he made me freer from government? Again, just dumbfounded silence. They don't even understand the question. So when you say, is there anyone in New York City that values liberty, I think most of these people are so far gone into statism and so lacking in all respect for themselves or their neighbors that the question, it doesn't even apply.
That's pretty pathetic.
Yes.
And sad. Oh, my goodness. And we've been talking about colonial history in the last few weeks, and how does that happen in 200 years? I mean, like I said earlier, we're not an old country. We're very young. And I really believe that, as like Rothbard's book, Conceived in Liberty, liberty was conceived in America. The thought pattern. Of course, they bought off on or they relied on other people's philosophies and this and that, but it really started here. America was, and I know a lot of anarchists that get after me with the founding fathers were a bunch of jerks too, and yeah, sure, they were human beings, whatever, but without them, we wouldn't have libertarianism, we wouldn't have anarcho-capitalism, because we have to have steps. So how do we go in less than 200 years to something so horrible? I mean, like you said, New York was a secessionist state.
Yes.
They wanted to secede. The North wanted to secede from the Union over slavery. And now they're all slaves.
Yes. Let me go back to your original question about how have we fallen so far. The Bible says money is the root, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I think we can see that in our history. It is, again, the overwhelming impression I receive from most people who love the state is they want to get something for nothing. They want their bills paid by all of us. So here we have the love of money driving all this. I don't know what else to attribute it to. Again, the constant propaganda from, the time you're in public school, that's just drummed into you. We're all one big happy family. We all have to take care of each other. We all have to give up our lunches for each other and that sort of thing. When you get a child in school, and let me say right here, I am a huge proponent of homeschooling. If you have children, you owe it to those kids not to be turning them over to government, okay? Yep. If you have kids, they belong with you at home, learning from you, not from some stranger in a classroom who's going to fill their heads full of propaganda. But you get a child in a public school, and then you get him home, and he's plunked down in front of a television. And again, let me mount another of my soapboxes and say I despise, detest, and abhor television. I will not have one in my home. I will not allow its filth to invade my sanctuary. If you have a TV and I come to visit you and you're busy watching it, or it's even running in the background, I get up and leave. I will have nothing to do with this filthy medium. And I encourage everyone who loves liberty. One thing if you're an adult, and that's the decision you've made to watch television, but if you have children, you owe it to them not to be infiltrating their consciousness with the filth that is broadcast and the pro-statist propaganda that is spewed relentlessly from an idiot box. So those would be my contributions to why the country is in the mess it's in, Josh, is just too many people concerned with getting something for nothing, too much propaganda, and we're getting the kids at their most vulnerable stages when they are young. You tell a child something for 12 years from the time he's, even now they're trying to get it even earlier. I was going to say from the time he's 5, but here in New York City we've had a huge push for a free, quote, paid for by others, pre-kindergarten, okay, and Bill Comrade de Blasio has actually pushed that through, and I forget how many, I think it was 50,000 applications for the first 25,000. I listened to this on the news, and I'm sitting there thinking, seriously, you found 50,000 parents in New York City who care nothing more about their kids than they want to shove them out the door as soon as they're 3 or 4 years old. Let me be free. Let me have my whole day. I can't be bothered rearing my own children. I want the state to do it. I would just say to parents like that, why did you have children? Why didn't you think this through? If that's your attitude, just get rid of them as soon as they can walk out the door on their own. I'm just mystified by all that. But, this is, I think, why we're in the state we're in. Kids are being raised by the state, and they're being propagandized to adore and love big government.
Yep. Even look at Frederick Bastiat and the law in 1850, which, again, another 160 years ago, said the same thing. I mean, he saw it then, and the Founding Fathers saw it then.
Yes.
They knew exactly what could happen or whatever, and it's so frustrating because we were given a gift. We really were, and even, but I guess even Jefferson, after not too long, said, oh, man, we screwed up.
Yeah. I have to say there are an awful lot of anarcho-capitalists that really despise the founders. Yep. I am not one of them. I think the founders were terrific thinkers, terrific philosophers. I cut them a lot of slack because the philosophy of liberty, like any other philosophy, has grown through the ages. We know a lot more about the ramifications of freedom and what political slavery is than the founders did, because we've had subsequent thinkers who've contributed, such as Bastiat. Okay, let's remember that the founders lived before the Austrian School of Economics. Adam Smith is just coming out in 1776, okay, so they didn't even have much beyond. They had nothing beyond Smith, okay, and Smith is not that much to explain how free markets work.
Yep.
Okay, so they're battling all that. I mean, the people that want to blame them for the state we're currently in, the people that keep, trying to get across this conspiracy theory, Hamilton. Well, okay, Hamilton probably was, but Hamilton's out there trying to enslave us all. You're not giving these men the credit they deserve, and it's as though we would try to blame them for the fact that there were so many deaths after guys had been in battle and then they died from bacterial infections because the state of hygiene was so poor. Okay, this is ridiculous. They didn't understand about germs. That whole theory of germs is a century in the future. For us to blame them as well for philosophical failings when much of that knowledge lay in the future is preposterous.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because, they were living in a time when the divine right of kings was still the law of the land. Basically, to doubt that was heresy. I mean, you were a heretic. You were evil to doubt the divine right of kings. And these guys, yeah, I'm right there with you, because I can see where they made mistakes, but they didn't know any better.
No, they didn't know any better.
They were, what they did was so amazing. I mean, they defied that.
And look at how many people we have today who ought to know better and believe in the divine right of kings.
Yep.
Okay? I mean, those are the people I fault. You stand there and you try to tell me the state is always right and I, as a Christian, have to obey the state per Romans 13 and all this hogwash. You are far, far worse than any of the founding fathers who sincerely believed what they preached. And yes, they got some of it wrong, but it wasn't their fault.
Yep, absolutely. I remember I had Richard Mayberry with us one time, and I said something about Hamilton, and he said, well, wait a minute. Sure, he was not so great that we see him now, he said, but he would be appalled from what he saw today. Even Mr. Bankster would have been appalled by what he saw today. I thought that was right on. Cause
I can't stand Hamilton. He's just my least favorite founder, but I agree. Even he would be appalled at the amount of statism and corruption.
Yep.
And I think it might have helped him revise a lot of his thinking. Could he see what we've degenerated to?
Well, Becky, I have to take the bottom of the news, Fox News, and we'll be right back to you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
The search teams reached the epicenter of the quake, and there's still no word from many climbers who were on Mount Everest. The powerful 7.8 quake struck an area between the capital Kathmandu and the city of Pokhara.
Fox Radio's David Piper, Olympic gold medalist and reality TV star Bruce Jenner, reveals he's a transgender woman in an interview with ABC News' Diane Sawyer, saying when he was about 8 or 9, he felt a deep yearning to put on a dress.
And at that time, I didn't know why I was doing it. Besides, it just made me feel good.
The interview included messages of support from his 6 biological children. He said his Kardashian stepchildren have mostly been understanding. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Local Talk Radio keeps you informed on all the developments on the pollution issue. Who's banning what? Who's blowing smoke? Put another log on the fire with KFAR.
Spirit of the Lord is now. There is liberty, and the Spirit lives inside of me. Where the Spirit of the Lord is now, there is liberty. There is liberty.
I love this song. This is Shane and Shane. The song's called Liberty. My name is Joshua Bennett. This is Patriot, Lament, and we have a special guest today is Becky Akers. Becky, are you still with us?
I'm with you.
Right on. So let's take a twist here. We've been talking about the Founding Fathers. Let's talk about the most vilified of them all.
My hero.
Benedict Arnold.
Yes.
I don't know if it was the last time you were with us or the time before we talked about Nathan Hale, which I love that. I love your book and I love his whole story. But let's talk about Benedict Arnold. So we, as Americans, I mean, obviously I don't know, when you want to call someone a traitor, he's a Benedict Arnold, blah, blah, blah. So tell us who the real Benedict Arnold was. Let's go beyond the statist propaganda.
Yes.
And talk about who he really was.
One of the things you can understand very easily about Arnold is I want everybody to imagine if Ron Paul's political enemies were to write a history of him, what would they say about him and how would he come off looking? That's essentially what happened to Benedict Arnold, okay? Let me back up to the beginning and explain. I began researching. I first of all had written a novel on Nathan Hale, and just my ultimate hero. I've adored Nathan Hale ever since I can remember. Was shocked to find out nobody had ever written an adult book about him. All the novels about him in nonfiction were all for children. So I wanted to write a novel for adults about Nathan Hale because he just lived such an incredible life. Finished that, published it. It's available on Amazon under the title Halestorm, H-A-L-E, Storm. Was so lonely for him. Wanted to write a sequel, but that's kind of hard to do when your heroes died at the end. You know, what do you do? Bring him back to life? Decided to do another novel on his friend, Benjamin Talmadge. That led me to the Benedict Arnold treason plot. Talmadge was instrumental in thwarting Arnold's treason. Well, now, of course, Arnold is trying to sell out everything Nathan Hale had achieved. I began my research with a furious frenzy to prove Arnold was just the most dastardly traitor that ever walked the earth. And within a few months, my opinion of him had entirely reversed. Now, how is that possible? Because I looked at the facts. Unlike most historians who see, the court historians see the state as some glorious entity and they believe everything that other court historians tell them, I came to the Arnold story with a fresh eye, none of these preconceptions that the state is our mighty mistress and we're all just profoundly grateful to be Americans and profoundly grateful to live under the thugs in D.C. I was looking at the story as it really is, okay? The standard explanation for why Arnold committed his treason is he made a fortune off it. This is completely, entirely untrue. Arnold lost money, lost lots of it, switching sides, okay? Second big reason that the court historians give for his defection is that Congress treated him abysmally. That's absolutely true. Congress did abuse this man over and over again. They abused virtually all the Continental Army officers, and many of them reacted just the way Benedict Arnold did. You see, they didn't go out and commit treason because of it. Arnold didn't either. Generally, what they did was they resigned their commissions in the Continental Army and went home until George Washington would intervene and get them back, whatever, persuade Congress to stop arguing with them, which is exactly what he did in Arnold's case as well. So once we get past all that, once we realize that what we've been told about Arnold, the commonly accepted truths about him, are all lies, we start asking then why? Okay, this guy was an enormous hero of the Continental Army.
Yep.
He seems to have been born knowing more about martial skills than anybody else on either side throughout the whole war. Now, as far as I can find out, he never actually studied tactics or strategy or anything like that. Henry Knox, who was the commander of Continental Army's artillery, the cannon and everything, Henry Knox did. We have documentary evidence of Knox sitting in his bookstore in Boston reading treatises on how to fire a cannon and stuff like that. I've never come up across any evidence that indicates Arnold did the same thing. He seems to have just been born knowing all this, and he was a phenomenal genius at military tactics, at leadership. He could inspire men to do incredibly amazing things like walk to Quebec through a winter wilderness where there is no food so that you can announce to the Quebecois, hey guys, we're here, we're revolting against the British Empire, we want you to join us, okay? He could convince almost 1,000 guys to do that with him. Okay, I mean, that's genius. I can't even convince my husband to go to the restaurant I want to go to at night, all right? This is genius to convince 1,000 guys to walk through a wilderness with you, all right? So he just seems to, and if you study his tactics for the various battles he fought in, they are amazing. He could turn the biggest disadvantage into the greatest advantage, and that's incredibly important when you're dealing with outnumbered forces, okay? So Arnold could take 1,000 guys, could assault a British force 5 times that size, and come out the winner, all right? Now, this is astonishing stuff, okay? So you read about the guy's tactics, you read about how he won all these lopsided battles, you read about how ingenious he was at deploying very minimal forces and counteracting professionals, okay? You can imagine what would happen if a bunch of us got together and decided to challenge a few regiments of the U.S. Army. Okay, that's essentially what Arnold is doing. He's taking a bunch of untrained people, and he is challenging the professional redcoats of the British Army and winning. All right?
Yeah,
so
the most professional army in the world.
Oh, absolutely. They were as feared then as the U.S. Army is feared today.
Yep.
Okay? So this is all just astonishing. Arnold wins a tremendously important battle in 1777. In September and October, there were a series of battles fought in Saratoga, around Saratoga, New York, okay? Arnold is grievously wounded. He was crippled for the rest of his life, but that is his final battle on behalf of the American cause, all right? So he defeats the British because of that battle, that series of battles, actually. The French entered the war openly on the continental side. That's a huge deal, okay, diplomatically, and the French had been giving us money the whole time because, we're fighting their ancient enemy, Britain, but now they openly come in. That turns a colonial struggle into a world war. Britain's got to do a lot of things differently now. She can't concentrate all her forces on the American colonies. There've got to be other forces left to fight in France and elsewhere. Okay, there's all kinds of stuff going on. But because of that battle, because of Arnold's victory there, we are pretty much an independent nation. Okay, many historians will say that was the turning point of the American Revolution, and we owe that to Arnold. All right, 18 months after that enormous victory, Arnold is talking to the British. He's negotiating with them to sell out the American cause. Why? Okay, that's what I tried to answer with my novel. The title's Abducting Arnold, and it is on Amazon, just as Halestorm is. Here's what I came up with. Here are the answers. When Arnold is so grievously wounded at Saratoga, Washington appoints him military governor of Philadelphia. There are many reasons for this. Arnold is the perfect guy to go in there because the British Army has occupied Philadelphia. It has just withdrawn as a consequence of the victory at Saratoga. With France in the war now, Britain has to consolidate its forces in New York City. So the half of the British Army that was down in Philadelphia and the half that was up at Saratoga, all of this is going to be, the half at Saratoga now is pretty much prisoners of war, but the remaining British forces throughout America are going to be concentrated in New York City. When the British pull out of Philadelphia, they leave behind a cauldron. And we can all understand this, okay? Imagine that your city has defied the U.S. government, and Army troops are stationed in your city, U.S. Army troops. Some of the people are going to flee the city, right? Those of us who love liberty, we're going to get out because we know what's going to happen with the U.S. Army in residence, all right? Same thing with Philadelphia. A lot of patriots left Philadelphia. But what if you are a fierce lover of liberty and you are too poor to leave, you don't have a country house, you are too ill to leave, your husband is too ill to leave, your wife is pregnant and about to give birth? What do you do in that situation? You've got to stay there. what happens when you defy the British Army? Obviously, you're arrested and maybe hanged. So you don't defy the British Army, all right? You're interested in surviving and getting your family fed, so you go along. Sometimes you might even not love liberty that much, and you might be intent on making a profit off the American army that's in your city. Well, Philadelphians were too. So when the British withdraw, there is this cauldron seething of people who have remained in the city, who've cooperated, collaborated, okay? There are the Patriots coming back to the city with military Governor Arnold, and they're going to look at their homes that have been devastated by the British occupation. When officers are quartered in a rebel's home, they don't take very good care of it. They do things like they chop holes in the first floor's floor so that they've created a privy inside, and their waste drains down into the cellar of the house. And you can get away with this in the winter. Okay, the British Army is in Philadelphia from about October of 1777 through May of 1778. You are now returning to see that's what's happened to your cellar, and you get to shovel all that out as it begins to stink now that it's thawing. Okay, your furniture's probably disappeared because the officers used it to warm themselves and their dinners. Your orchard's gone. You can't get the fruit anymore, so your family's not going to fare too well. You see all this devastation, and what happens? You are furious at the Patriots who remained behind because their homes didn't suffer nearly as much, okay? Because they collaborated, didn't they? Now, what do we add to this mix? What always happens in a situation like this where citizens are furious at each other? We have politicians just waiting to exploit the anger and the bitterness. That's exactly what happened in Philadelphia. There's a group of politicians who had come to prominence just as the war was beginning. They were known as the Radical Patriots, and I always love that name they chose for themselves, as though guys that starved at Valley Forge just weren't radical enough, okay? We've got the Radical Patriots. They have come to power in Philadelphia. They are extremely pro-state. In fact, they're very similar in their philosophy to today's progressives, okay? They think the state is wonderful. This is directly contrary to real patriots who are fighting to live free of government. Radicals are fighting to live with big government, with themselves in charge of it, okay? That is their quarrel with Great Britain. They don't want Great Britain ruling the colonies when they can, okay? Yep. That's why they are pro-revolution, and they are fiercely pro-revolution. And in fact, if you don't voice your fervor for revolution as often and as vehemently as they think you should, you're going to wind up on their bad side. All right? They are standing there. That they, in fact, had so much power in Philadelphia that when the Declaration of Independence is signed and published, the radicals come in and they control the convention that Pennsylvania calls to write a new constitution for the brand new state. Okay, so in 1776, many states are calling their constitutional conventions in the wake of the Declaration of Independence, since they're now free and independent states. Okay, they're setting up their state governments. The radicals at that point are strong enough to control that process. So we have a radical government in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania that in the 18th century is very much espousing democracy. Okay, now the 18th century did not like democracy as the 21st century does. The 18th century understood it was mob rule. 18th century understood democracy is tyrannical. Okay, that's what the Radical Patriots are trying to foist on Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And when the British come in to occupy Philadelphia, the radicals either flee or go underground. But now the British are out of Philadelphia. They're going back to New York City. Arnold is coming in as military governor, and the radicals are returning to power. Their power is going to continue to grow over the next 18 months. They are going to become more and more dictatorial. They are going to hang dissidents. Okay, that's the only occurrence during the American Revolution. Okay, the French in their revolution hanged and guillotine people without thought. In the American Revolution, we didn't do that. But the radicals did. Okay, so they hang dissidents. They dispossess people if they own estates that the radicals really covet. The radicals go in and say, oh, you know what, you were a collaborator. The big bugaboo then was not terrorist, as it is today. It was British sympathizer, okay? So if you had something the radicals wanted, bingo, you are a British sympathizer. You deserve to be run out of town on a rail, and they will take your property, okay? Now, they function, as I say, very much like modern progressives, and they had the same kind of witch hunt going. Instead of hunting for terrorists, however, they're hunting for loyalists, hunting for British sympathizers, all right? Arnold comes in as military governor and sees all this, and he is appalled. Here he's been shedding his blood for liberty. He is crippled for life for liberty. And what does he behold but a bunch of tenpenny politicians overturning everything he struggled for? Okay, so Arnold is on the warpath. He fought the radicals as fiercely as he'd fought the British because Arnold loved liberty. He's going to fight anyone, anywhere who is trying to impose political slavery on his fellow citizens. He fought the British. Now he's going to fight the radicals, who, of course, hate his guts. Okay? We have a contest going back and forth between the two of them for a couple of months. Arnold's laughing at the radicals. He's publicly ridiculing them. He actually even fights a literal battle in the streets of Philadelphia, complete with cannon and casualties, against the radicals with a couple of his fellow patriots. In fact, 3 of the men who participate in this battle signed the Declaration of Independence. Okay, so they're all fighting with Arnold against the radicals. But after 6 months, 8 months, something like that, Arnold realizes that all of his protests and all of his efforts to defeat the radicals are in vain. They are still imposing their draconian rule on Philadelphia. They've got all kinds of bureaucracies they've set up. They have decreed prices for Philadelphia. Okay, if you're a farmer bringing your wheat in, you have to sell it at the price that the radicals tell you. Now, in the 18th century, we're used to that kind of government interference. 18th century, that was anathema, okay? And the radicals got away with that. That's how powerful they were. So Arnold is thwarting all this, trying to thwart it, standing up to them best he can. He's not getting anywhere. He goes to Congress. By this time, radical influence has penetrated the Congress. In fact, Pennsylvania is the most powerful state in the Congress because it supplies the most men and materiel to the Continental Army. That means Pennsylvania calls the shots in Congress. Pennsylvania's delegates to Congress are controlled by the radicals. That means what the radicals want in Congress, the radicals get. When Arnold goes to Congress in the naive belief that they will help him destroy the radicals, they instead turn around and investigate him. The charges they bring are so bogus that the radicals actually have to threaten they will dissolve the Union of 13 states and withdraw Pennsylvania if the other delegates don't vote against Arnold. That's how rotten their charges are against him. They are so patently untrue that when Congress tries to rebel against the injustice to Arnold, the radicals threaten, well, then we'll just dissolve the Union. So at the end of all that, Arnold is looking at the distinct possibility in April of 1780 that the Continental Army is going to win the war. But what is that going to do? That is going to leave the radical patriots in supreme control, not just of Philadelphia, not just of Pennsylvania, but of the entire new United States. What can he do to thwart these dictators? What can he do to fight for freedom? Congress won't help him. He's been to the most powerful political body there is in the state, in the new states, and it will not help him. It sides with the radicals. Arnold seeks out the British Army as the lesser of two evils, the only entity that hates the radicals and understands their threat to the country as well as he does. And that is why Benedict Arnold committed treason.
Wow.
It fits the facts a whole lot better. You see, I don't have to lie and say, well, he did it for money when he didn't make any money.
Yep.
I don't have to lie and say, well, it's because he was miffed at Congress when he wasn't. I mean, he had ample opportunity to be and had ample reason to be and was. I should say he wasn't miffed. He was, but that's not why he committed treason. That's not enough to have moved a man like Benedict Arnold. I'll also say that as skilled as Arnold was martially, and as much as he knew about waging war, he was an absolute neophyte at politics. He didn't understand politics. He didn't understand people reacting in a way that would manipulate others. He was a very straightforward kind of person. He didn't play political games, and he didn't understand when other people were playing political games. I have a lot of sympathy for him because I'm the same way. I don't understand politics. I never follow political races. I can't stand the skullduggery. I can't stand the filth and the corruption. I don't care what Jeb Bush thinks about anything. I don't care what Hillary Clinton is going to do to try to win. It's like, you two can fight over your pile of marbles, and you are just lower than a snail's belly. I don't want anything to do with you. Arnold seems to have been the same way. Just couldn't understand what motivated people to engage in such debased behavior. So when he went to Congress, he seems to have no understanding whatsoever, no comprehension that Congress is very firmly in the radicals' corner and that Congress is going to rule in the radicals' favor. He seems to have been completely blindsided by that. So he's actually an extremely huge hero, very sympathetic character for all of us who hate the state, who want nothing to do with it, who want to live free. Benedict Arnold wanted the same thing.
I even remember when I was a teenager, history was, I love history, American history. And I remember reading that the reason that Benedict Arnold turned treasonous was because of his British wife.
Yes. Well, I have to agree, but let me put a little asterisk beside that. I think her name was Peggy Shippen. Arnold had been married before to a woman named Margaret. Interesting, both his wives were named Margaret. When he was a widower when he met Peggy Shippen. She was one of Philadelphia's most foremost belles, came from a very wealthy and powerful and influential family. Her father was a British royal official, so the Shippens were all tarred as being loyalists. Peggy doesn't seem to have cared that much about politics, but again, given who her father was, the radicals persecuted her and her family unbearably. They're constantly picking on the Shippens. I think that motivated Arnold. He saw this. He was a very gallant and chivalrous man, and this outraged him. The abuse that the radicals heaped on a young girl, Peggy was only about 17 or 18 at this time. He was outraged at the abuse they heaped on her and many other women. Okay, Arnold is consistently on record in letters defending women the radicals were picking on. Often they were widows or they were temporarily abandoned perforce by their husbands who had had to flee with the advent of the British. Okay, these women are holding down choice estates that the radicals covet, and so they would persecute these women, exile them, try to get them out of the home so they could grab them. Arnold is on record time and again defending them. So I think that was the role Peggy played, not that she actively whispered in his ear, "Oh, let's commit treason, let's commit treason." I think much more she was, the abuse the radicals heaped on her motivated Arnold to say, "This is outrageous, and we have got to defeat these thugs."
And the Congress was I've never understood it, but Congress was horrible to Arnold.
Yes,
I mean, they really.
Yes.
He was. Like you've pointed out, he was a champion for their cause, and yet Congress was absolutely disloyal and horrible to him.
Yes, and they treated George Washington the same way.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on with Congress. They were always scared to death of precisely what the radicals were doing. They were scared to death that we were going to overthrow the British Empire, but that a colonial faction is going to step in that vacuum of power and seize control. So they're laudable in that fear. I would be very afraid of that, too. If we ever did have another shooting revolution here in the United States, we all should be worried about that. I think a shooting revolution would not turn out well, because I think that a faction would step in as soon as the feds are overthrown. They would step in, and we'd have even worse tyranny than we currently do. Okay, that's precisely what Congress feared, and that's one reason why they were so ready to clip the wings of any military officer, because remember, at that point where you have monarchies around the world, that's what happens. The military seizes control of the king, and then you've got, boom, new tyranny and new dictator. So that's what Congress is trying to do. They're very jealous of their own power. They didn't want the military stepping on their toes. And that's, interestingly, Josh, that's one reason why I am convinced that George Washington was specially appointed by God Almighty himself to lead the American Revolution, because Washington had no problem with that at all. He agreed with Congress. He never tried to overstep his authority. Congress, even at one point for 6 months, gave Washington dictatorial powers. Told him, you go ahead and make all the decisions. You don't even need to consult us. Washington didn't do anything that he wouldn't have done if Congress had been in charge anyways.
Yeah, even King George at the time, I remember when reading about when at the end of the war, and everyone in the whole world that knew what was going on expected Washington to be the king
That's right.
of America. And he turned over his sword and said, okay, I'm going back to the farm. And King George himself said that surely this is the greatest man who ever lived.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Because nobody had ever done anything like that. I mean, This is Cincinnatus brought up into the 18th century. This is just amazing. And he wowed the world with that. And Josh, think how we would love to have a politician like that today.
Yep.
And we never will.
No, but you're absolutely right. We would. Oh, yeah, wow.
Yeah. It had as much impact then as it does now, as it would now, because people, human nature hasn't changed.
Yep.
Politicians were as grasping after power then as they are now. The only difference between their time and ours is that technology has made it extremely possible to have absolute total control of your population.
Ooh.
And
we need to talk about that.
Yes.
We're getting to the top of the hour here. Can you stay with us longer?
I sure can.
Okay.
I'd be very honored. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we've got about 50 seconds or so. So we'll just wrap up. If anyone just emails patriotslament@gmail.com, we'll send you Becky's books, either Halestorm or Abducting Arnold, either one of those. And they're both fabulous books. I got to say, I did like the Hale book more.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, Nathan Hale is so wonderful. Man.
I adore that guy. I can't wait to meet him in heaven one day. He's a devout Christian, and his courage at the gallows flowed directly from his deep and profound faith in the Lord Jesus. And I just can't wait to rush up to him in heaven and say, Nathan, I've thought about you every single day of my life, and I just can't believe I'm here with you now. What an honor.
All right, Becky. Well, we got to take the Fox News break, and we'll be right back to you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Blow off some steam. KFAR.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens the free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams.
Whenever the legislators endeavored to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms.
Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
My people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
Some people you can never please. You might as well just let them be. They mock everything not their own from their imaginary throne. But I won't bow down even if the whole world thinks I'm crazy. So hey, this song is for us. So put your hands in the air if you're crazy like us. Hey, that's freedom you hear, coming right to your ear. That's the sound from our bus. Hey.
Oh, yeah. We love rock and roll. If you're crazy like us, put your hands in the air. That's freedom you hear. That means you must be listening to Patriot Lament. Good morning. My name is Josh Bennett. And we have Mr. Claudio Gomez with us today.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Mr. Mike Anderson dropped in. Thank
Morning.
you, Mike. Good morning. And we have a very special guest on the radio with us today. One of the most, well, I don't know how to put it. Just everyone said, you have to bring her back on immediately. But it's been quite a while. Becky Akers. And you can find her writing on... I think the best way is just to Google her name. Akers is Akers. And you will find her annihilating the NSA, the TSA, well, all the alphabet soups. She's hammering on them. Or you can just go on LouRockwell.com or Lou Rockwell's blog, and she's hammering down there basically every day. And she also frequently post on Patriot Cement blog, so we really appreciate that. And if she doesn't, usually Jim posts something that she wrote on the blog anyway. So and she just had a, I think it was a 4-part series on anarchism with where she was a guest on another show, and it was really good. And we posted all those up. So Becky, are you with us still? Hopefully.
I sure am in all senses.
Awesome. Awesome.
And I thank you for that very kind intro again. I'm going to have to send you even more money now.
Oh no, we're very happy to have you. You really hammered down. It's awesome. And what's been to me was really well, even that interview you did with anarchism with I can't remember
what's Sila?
Layla Markham, who's a big fan of Patriot's Lament, and I urge everyone or anyone listening who is sick and tired of preachers and Sunday school teachers and Christian brothers and sisters telling you that Romans 13 says we have to obey evil, I urge you to go to Layla's blog. It's Aurora Watcher AK. That's all one word, no spaces, AuroraWatcherAK.com. And we have a series on Christianity and the biblical origins of anarchy, the biblical justification for it. Layla had invited me to go over this with her because, and she said something I really like. She said, I don't know about anarchy, but I'm willing to consider it as a devout believer. I'd like to know, what does God say about political government? And I'm confused because government is so entirely corrupt, and by obeying it, as Romans 13 tells me to do, I am committing sin. So what's the answer to that? So she and I explored that, and there's a lot of information. There are a lot of ways to rebut this Romans 13 obsession that has taken hold of American churches. I can give you the short response right now, but I urge everyone to go to her blog and read it for yourself so that you have the scripture and the reasoning down, because you're going to get assailed in any church I've been to if you try to say this in Sunday school. But here's what's going on with Romans 13. It is a tremendously poor, in fact, and actually erroneous translation of the Greek words that are used in Romans 13. What's going on there is that those words, there's a certain word in Greek, and I majored in Greek in college, so I know what I'm talking about. The word for government in Greek there's one word that's basileus, which is king. Okay, that is nowhere found in Romans 13. What is instead in Romans 13 are other kinds of authorities, such as fathers, such as social leaders, such as teachers. Okay, those are the words used for authority. What Romans 13 is telling us is that we should give respect to those authorities in our lives who are there for our good. Okay, we're to give respect to our fathers, to those who are teaching us, and we're not talking public school teachers now, okay? Remember, Rome did not have such a thing. If you were a Roman patrician, you hired a tutor for your son, and that's how education was carried out. So we're to give respect to whom respect is due, our fathers and other people who instruct us, the leader of the synagogue, the Christian pastor who instructs us for our good, okay? If we persist in taking that mistranslation of Romans 13, if we persist in saying, okay, government, we're supposed to obey government, there is so much in that passage then that turns us into absolute fools and makes God himself, as the author of Romans 13, into some kind of imbecile. Okay? It is patently obvious to all of us that government does not wield the sword for our good. Right. Okay? All of us, our daily experience tells us that. Why would Romans 13 make such a claim? It's absolutely lunatic to say that. All right? When we instead get away from that erroneous translation, we realize that it's telling us the authorities in our lives, like our fathers and our teachers, punish us for our own good so that we'll improve. Now we have utter sense, don't we? Okay? So I again urge you to go to Layla's blog, read all this, and I have to say that I did not know this about Romans 13. I have not read the entire New Testament in the original Koine Greek. I'm indebted to a gentleman named Paul Green, who also writes for Lou Rockwell. You can find his writings there, and he goes into this in much greater depth than I just did. I recap some of it on the blog, and I have on Layla's blog, I have links to Paul Green's original treatises on this. I urge anyone who is sick and tired of being told you have to obey corrupt politicians, when the Bible never once tells us to do that, and instead urges just the opposite, to oppose these people in their evil as they oppress the poor. How can any righteous Christian stand there and actually say from the pulpit of the Almighty God, yeah, you got to obey politicians, you know, Romans 13, when they oppress the poor, when they scheme to get the poor separated from their hard-earned incomes, you better support that or you're in danger of hellfire. I've had it with these people. Come on, educate yourselves.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Claudio Gomes, Becky. Wasn't Paul in prison when he wrote that because he was not obeying government?
I'll tell you what, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten your first name.
Claudio,
you're a very special person. I want to address you, if I may, for a moment on another topic entirely. I'm going to assume from your name and from your accent you were not born here. Am I correct?
Yes, I'm born. I was born in Brazil.
He's a brown guy.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And I want to use you as a springboard to tell the audience something else they may not realize about liberty, and that is that our liberty to move and to live, to travel and to live where we want to, is God-given. I'm going to assume that the INS and various other government bureaucracies made you jump through hoop after hoop when you decided to live here, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. I got to do a lot of paperwork and fingerprinting and pay a lot of money. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That is all entirely unconstitutional. And if anyone doubts that, I challenge you to send me the clause in the Constitution that empowers the federal government to persecute people exercising their God-given rights to live and travel freely and live where and how they choose to live, okay? There's nothing in our Constitution that would allow that. It is absolutely, the federal government does not have that power. The only thing the federal government may do is set the process of naturalization. In other words, they get to tell you how long you have to live here before you're considered a citizen, but they may not chase you down, they may not charge you money, they may not persecute you when you try to cross the border. They can't even set up booths on the border to harass you when you come in. Let me say one more thing on this topic, and then we'll go back to your original question, and that is, anyone who thinks otherwise, anyone who says to me, well, yeah, but, ISIS is out there. Well, yeah, but, TB could come into the country. Well, yeah, but, okay? Just reflect on this. Our government now openly, admittedly, tortures people. If a government is strong enough to keep all these guys from Brazil and Mexico and Central and South America out, it is strong enough to keep us in. And I don't know about you, but when they start torturing folks, I'm making a beeline out of here.
Yep. And even the reading the founding fathers and stuff like that, they welcomed immigration.
Absolutely they did. This whole animus against immigrants didn't start until the 1870s and 80s. And of course, like so much else that's evil in this country, we can thank the Supreme Court for it. They went and just invented an interest in immigration for the federal government. Same philosophy that they used for the TSA, interestingly enough, okay? They just invented an interest for the federal government in safe aviation, and voila, we all get sexually assaulted at the airports. All right? So the same thing that came out of immigration and this complex and this obsession with torturing poor people, fleeing poverty and injustice and tyranny, fleeing to get to a freer country. Ha, what a joke that is anymore. But anyways, that same animus against these folks gave rise to the TSA. See, it's all related. You start giving on one little iota of freedom, and pretty soon you have all kinds of statist evil.
Yep. And even for Christians, the Bible is flat out tells us that welcome the immigrants, treat them well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely.
The Bible doesn't say anything like, oh, you better keep them out and have all. No, it says welcome them.
Over and over and over again throughout the Old and New Testaments. And it's often, interestingly enough, in a triad. Okay, we are to welcome the fatherless, the stranger, and the widow. We are to care for the fatherless, the stranger, and the widow. The stranger, of course, being the immigrant. Israel is commanded over and over throughout the Old Testament, you better treat the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow well. Okay? These three very vulnerable groups have God's special blessing. And those Christians who stand there and erroneously and idolatrously tell us we have to obey the state in its persecution of immigrants, oh, there isn't a ring of hell hot enough.
That's actually why the Bible, that's the only reason that the Bible put there, that why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, because they didn't do that. It was not because the gay people, it was because they are fed and rich, and they're not taking care of the poor and the fatherless and the widow.
Yes, but now let us qualify that a moment and just be sure that we understand, that everyone listening understands, we're talking about voluntary compassion, not forced government welfare. Okay, this is always wrong. Government stealing money from us, no matter how, quote, good the results of what it does with that money. No, you can't bring good out of evil. Theft is wrong all the time. Every place, no matter what funny costume you're wearing, no matter how much you say, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, does not justify theft. Anything you do with that money, you're doing with stolen money, and it is cursed. So we are talking strictly voluntary charity here.
Yeah, I was just looking at Leviticus, and it says flat out what you were talking about with the immigrants. It says, when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you will do him no wrong.
There you go. There you go.
And it's totally opposite. Christians now, I mean, the Mexicans are going to come in and take all of our jobs. Oh, we've got to have strong immigration. We've got to, what who are we to tell other people where they can go? It's just, it's amazing.
Yes. And I'll tell you something that really caused me to cry. I actually sobbed with shame. Is I read that Barack Obama, the biggest liar, the biggest blasphemer, the most reprehensible, low-down scum in the world, stood up and proclaimed how the Bible tells us we're not to persecute immigrants. Okay? Now, here's why I'm crying with shame. Why wasn't there a pastor, a Christian pastor who loves the Lord, out there saying that? Why aren't Christian churches out there saying it? No, we have to hear from the most reprehensible sinner on earth. We have to hear from him that we're supposed to honor immigrants and that we're supposed to help people in trouble. This is just... Imagine the Lord's fury with his people. That an absolute buffoon like Barack Obama is preaching the word, and we are silent. We're too busy on our knees genuflecting to Almighty Leviathan to get out there and preach the Lord's word. What is wrong with us?
Actually, the majority of the people that are against the immigrants, they are the traditional conservative Christians, and they're against it. They they are not legal. That's different. So you need to have a paper for.
Yes. Well, you know what? Jews in Nazi Germany weren't legal either. What do they say to that?
Yep.
I have no patience with this. This is not rocket science. It's not like I sit around and I have the luxury of studying this stuff all day and I come up with these wacko theories. No, this is not hard to understand. You read the Bible as a Christian, it is your bounden duty to be reading the Bible every single day. And you see that in there, you know we don't obey man, we obey the Lord. And when the Lord says, care for the widow, the fatherless, and the orphan, you do that. You don't say, oh, now, wait a minute, they're not legal. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. You know, that motherless little boy that came here and didn't have time to fill out the forms in triplicate? No, sorry, not legal, has to go back. This is insanity, and it is sinful. It is straight from the pit of hell, and we as individual Christians and as churches need to stand against it.
I wanted to quickly read what Claudia was talking about earlier that we've discussed several times. Is from Ezekiel 16, and he was specifically talking about Sodom. And the Lord says, as I live, declares the Lord God, your sister Sodom and her daughters have not done as you and your daughters have done. Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, the excess of food and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and the needy. They were haughty and did an abomination before me, so I removed them. So we've been taught that I'm not justifying sodomy or whatever, but we've been taught that God took out Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sodomy. But he says in Ezekiel, no, they were haughty in their pride and they didn't take care of the needy. That's what the church is supposed to do. And yet, as long as they get on food stamps, that's all good. Keep out the needy with Libya. All those people are trying to escape Libya to get away from the violence that's going on there. 900 people just drowned to death. And our government is helping the Italian government. Well, let's put a blockade up. Let's keep those people there. And Christians are all for it.
Yes, and I had the same reaction you did, Josh. I just laughed when I heard those reports about, the European governments are going to get together and determine what they can do to prevent this from happening again. I want to say, you idiots! They did it because you have passed so many laws against immigrants. Yep. Of course people are skulking around trying to get away from a war zone. Of course they don't want to get interdicted by your thugs on the open ocean. That's why they died, because they're trying to evade your stupid, satanic laws against free travel and free moving. Come on. And the U.S. government is no different. I have cried buckets over the Cuban refugees who have been drowned, drowned, literally drowned under the Clinton administration. Remember wet foot, dry foot? If you don't remember it, read about it, okay? Bill Clinton, as president, declared that we can just drown people fleeing Castro's hell. Okay, if they didn't make it to land, the Coast Guard would literally take fire hoses and douse these people, and they would drown them. Your government, people, when you go to church and your pastor tells you, pay your taxes, that's what Romans 13 is, this is what you are subsidizing. Okay? Stand up and tell the guy in the pulpit, no, I'm not going to pay for murder. How dare you? I've had it up to here, as you can probably tell, with these pastors that think filling out the IRS's form and declaring every last penny is what an honest Christian does. You are going to stand before Almighty God, and you are going to give an account as to why you cooperated and willingly funded outright murder.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well, that just shocked us all into
that
silence.
Yeah. Yeah, and for anyone who says, well, wet foot, dry foot, that's 20 years ago. Abortion? Okay, how many of your taxes are going for abortion? And don't tell me about the cute little accounting tricks that all the bureaucrats in D.C. pay. Well, you know what? We're not going to use this penny to pay for abortion. We're just going to take the funds from another account. But that way we can say that this program doesn't fund abortion. Yes, it does. Okay, your taxes that were killing children who haven't even had a chance to breathe yet. Yeah. Okay? And you as a Christian are worried about whether or not you've given every last penny that the IRS's thieves say you owe, and you as a pastor are worried about whether your congregants are honest? Come on, people. Come on.
Well, one thing that bothers me, too, is how upset people get over, and maybe rightfully so, over government welfare, quote unquote, to poor people, and yet so they're upset that, well, my taxes are going to pay for some mother that has a bunch of kids that can't afford it, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, they don't have the same indignation for the wars or, like you said, the abortion or any of that. The warfare state, they have no problem with that. But by golly, some homeless mother with 8 kids is getting my tax dollars, which, of course, the church is supposed to take care of them. But the attitude towards one and not towards the other, towards the warfare state, is just mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling.
We have so many of our priorities wrong in America, and the American church is going to answer for all of this. And I am constantly amazed at how we strain at the gnat and swallow the camel, how we support evil, and we call it evil not to support evil. Okay? Now, let me also warn all of you that when you bring any of this up in Sunday school, you are going to be ridiculed and you are going to be dismissed. Get ready for that. Keep at it, however, okay? Let me remind you, we are not responsible for results. All right? We are responsible for carrying the Word of God where it most needs to be heard, and lamentably, that's often our own churches anymore. Okay? But I'll tell you my experience. I sat in a church. I brought all this up in Sunday school. We just happened to have seen a film about the Reformation in England, and basically the message of the film was whether the Catholics or the Protestants had the throne in England, people died horrible deaths because of government, all right? Now, I didn't say it that plainly, and, this is over a few Sundays or whatever. I mentioned that after the film, since nobody else was touching it. I said, isn't this a wonderful lesson to us? Government is force. Government is murderous, brutal force. We need to eschew it. And I went on my little rant. And when I got all done, the Sunday school teachers basically said, ignore her. Now, he didn't say it that bluntly, but that was the idea. Okay? So I'm just warning all of you. Church people, and I'm not going to call them Christians because I don't think many of them are. Church people are extremely closed to the gospel. Isn't that sad? They are closed to God's commandments that don't comport with their neoconservative views. Yeah. How damnable. How heretical. That's okay. We're not responsible for them. We're responsible for proclaiming the truth.
Yep. I think it's great what you were earlier talking about Romans 13, too. I always think about Romans 13 as like maybe start at Romans 1 and read up through Romans 12 and then try to make Romans 13 fit the other 12 chapters that you just read, because they won't. Yes. Not with the interpretation that you're going to give it. It doesn't fit. And if it doesn't fit, if you can't live, well, maybe you can live it, but not if you're going to be a Christian. If it doesn't fit, then obviously it's wrong. The interpretation of it, anyway, is wrong. It's no different than the Romans 13 that's taught in the Church of America today is no different than the divine right of kings that was taught 300 years ago in England, France, Italy, any of those.
That is precisely right. And I'll tell you, before I found Paul Green's wonderful essay on Romans 13 and checked his Greek, and he's right about it all, before I had found that, Romans 13 really bothered me a lot because it seemed to, again, I'm not talking about what I now know I'm talking about, Romans 13 as it is usually presented with its wrong translation.
Becky, can I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm not very good with, I'm not a professional. I got to go to a break.
Okay.
I'll come right back to you, though. Hold that thought, because I want to hear it, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
FAR.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. In earthquake-devastated parts of Nepal, survivors spending the night outdoors.
Camped outside their houses on the makeshift shelters because there's still a lot of fear and terror that a larger quake might hit.
GRN reporter Amyata Limbu in Kathmandu. The quake has killed more than 1,100 people and triggered a deadly avalanche on Mount Everest. Mountaineer Kenton Cool describing how devastating they can be.
These are tens of thousands of tons of ice that would have come rumbling down the mountainside with an air blast as well, which would have flattened tents and literally picked up people and thrown them across the mountainside.
Demonstrators in Baltimore promising their biggest march yet to protest the death of a man in police custody. This comes a day after the police department acknowledged it failed to get Freddie Gray the medical attention he needed after his arrest. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Our economy is in a free fall.
So what you're saying then is,
wake up, America.
When you want to talk about the news of the day, turn on News Talk 660 KFAR.
That's right. Not God Save the Queen, but let freedom ring. Welcome back to Patriot Lament. My name is Joshua Bennett. I have Mike and Claudio with me today, and we have super awesome guest, Becky Akers, with us. We get a lot of grief. Well, I don't so much anymore. When I first started playing this song, I got a lot of grief about it. Like, oh, quit you playing My Country 'Tis the rah, rah, rah. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I want freedom in my country. Doesn't mean my government. I know the difference between the state and the people that live here. Sweet land of liberty. Let's bring it back. Maybe it's not possible. I don't know. Becky.
Yes.
Claudio just told me about a bumper sticker he saw the other day, and it was a prayer. What did it say again?
Please, Jesus, protect me from his followers.
Yeah. Dear Jesus, protect me from your followers.
I like that.
That is pretty funny.
Yeah, and isn't it sad that it's so funny? Yeah.
It's funny because, unfortunately, today it's quite true.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I would probably argue whether they actually are his followers, but no, I'm not going to judge that way. But we definitely have some misgivings these days. I mean, the worship of the state of Israel, which boggles my mind and upsets me so much. Where
Yes.
I don't get that. It's let's murder the whole world to keep Israel safe. I don't get that. And the Christian church is so infatuated with it. It just boggles my mind. And
yes, they have this simplistic idea that because Israel is the promised land, that somehow we just bless everything, all its evil, all its persecution of Palestinians, all of its evil lying, its evil spying, and somehow that blesses us. I'm just like, really? You think God is that simplistic?
Yeah.
Wow.
No
what a
kidding.
conception you have of the Almighty.
No joke. Yeah, it's
to me shows that people don't even believe in God because they don't believe God even on their own beliefs that Israel is the chosen and you had to bless them and everything. They don't believe that God is powerful enough to protect them to make His word come true. So they have to do themselves or our government.
And let's remember something else here, too, Claudio, that they are supporting the Israeli government, okay?
Yes.
Now, government of any stripe is straight from the pit of hell, and it is a satanic invention. If you have any question about that, I'll direct you to the Gospel of Luke, where Satan tempts Christ and admits that he owns the governments of the world. Okay, he takes Christ up, remember, and they survey all the kingdoms, and there's that word we discussed before from Greek, basileus. That's the word that's used, the governments of the earth. Satan and Christ survey them, and Satan says, I will give these to you if you bow down and worship me. Now, how do you give something? You own it first, don't you? Okay, so Satan owns government. We need to all understand and recognize that. Therefore, idolatry of any government and any government of any stripe is from the pit of hell. Okay?
Oh.
Government is a satanic institution, but some of them are more bloodthirsty than others. I don't think it's because of lack of desire. I think it's simply a function of opportunity, okay? So Stalinist Russia could slaughter millions of its own citizens. I assure you, the Clinton regime, the Bush regime, would slaughter millions of U.S. citizens if it could get away with it. It can't, okay? Simply a matter of opportunity, not desire, okay? So when we are looking at Israel, let's understand that Israel's government is avowedly and professedly socialist. It is a communist government like Russia's, okay? And what do communist governments do? They eat their own. That is not to say that democratic governments are any better. They aren't. That's not my point. My point is that if you are a Christian and a follower of Jesus Christ, for you to support any government, but especially for you to support a socialist government, for you to idolize that government, for you to bow down to that government, there's something dramatically wrong with your Christianity.
Well, isn't democracy a fundamentally socialist idea anyway?
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's look at what democracy really is. Okay, we have God-given rights; they are inalienable. Okay, that means nobody can take them away from us. I don't care if 99 out of 100 people vote to take it away; they can't. They are inalienable rights by virtue of our humanity. We have these rights. Democracy tries to undermine all that, and democracy has fooled an awful lot of Americans now.
Well, yeah,
awful lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was saying now as now that the U.S. believes that democracy is the way to go, the American citizens believe that. They are eating their own. The state doesn't have to do it for them; they're doing it themselves.
Yes.
Now, eventually, the state will take over and do it. But and it's probably not going to take much longer, considering the state of mind of most of the people in this country.
Yes, we are cooperating with our own destruction. Just as the quote, Josh, I just love those quotes from the founders that you were beginning the segments with. Fantastic. I was nearly in tears listening to them. But that quote about, when destruction comes, it's going to come from within. We are living those times right now. We are living that prophecy. And it's really, really sad that we had the greatest gift on earth after salvation. Our salvation in Christ is our greatest blessing from a gracious God. Right after that is our freedom. And we have given away our birthright of freedom. We did it voluntarily. This is just the most tragic thing.
And even, you know what I love about you, Lou Rockwell, Tom Woods, these guys, Vance Lawrence, the way that you guys qualify God and freedom. It's a gift from Him. I mean,
Yes.
it's liberty and freedom is something that is from God.
Absolutely.
It's something that He wants us to have. And why
it's
don't we want it?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. It's fascinating to contemplate how God created this universe, okay, and how much salvation depends on freedom. Okay. Now, God could have made all of us just robotic, that we would automatically worship Him and there would never be any sin and we wouldn't rebel, but He didn't. He loves freedom so much, He gives every human being a choice. You can choose me or you can choose evil. It's up to you. Choose. Okay? So God Himself is the biggest libertarian going. Why we, His followers, disdain freedom, why we would want to force others to live like we think they should, why we would vote, why we would participate in the filthy political process, why we would justify the state, why we would obey the state, why we would give the state any thought at all. Why are we doing this? God Himself prizes freedom so much He gave it to each one of us. Why are we letting politicians and bureaucrats take away this incredible birthright?
Yep.
I'm mystified. And Josh, I was saying before the break that before I understood the correct translation of Romans 13, I was always extremely bothered by that passage. And I was especially, I didn't really have an answer when I would try to talk to other Christians about anarchy, and I would say, well, and I'd cite Luke and Satan tempting Christ, and, Satan owns government. Well, then why does the Bible tell us to obey it in Romans 13? I didn't have an answer. But what's fascinating about that? They never once tried to justify chattel slavery to me. And the Bible certainly doesn't come out against that either.
Yep.
So I'm fascinated again by our lack of priorities. Now, I have since, of course, come across that brilliant, correct translation of Romans 13. But again, I would say to Christians, why are you so hepped up who will not accept the correct translation of Romans 13, who continue to insist that we owe government obedience no matter what? I would say to them, then why aren't you hyping all the chattel slavery endorsements in the Old Testament? The Bible has a way that a person could be an chattel slave for the rest of his days without the possibility of ever being set free. Why don't I ever hear about that? But you pick and choose what parts of Scripture you want to emphasize to suit your political leanings, and that, my friend, is blasphemous.
Yeah, and the Scripture has it all through the Old Testament, too, that God hates the state. I mean, yes. When you look at the Israelites, I mean, they demand a king, and God tells Samuel, He says, go ahead and do it. Just, let them have their way. They're not rejecting you. They rejected me. And
think of the heartbreak in that. Think of that.
Yeah.
Think of how God's heart must have broken when He said that they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. Me. I'm the one who brought them out. I gave them freedom. They were slaves. I led them through the Red Sea. I killed the Egyptian army. I didn't let them get captured. And they're rejecting me. I mean, that alone should turn every Christian into an anarchist.
Yeah,
we need to recognize the state is an idol, and it is a false god, and it has, from the beginning of time, competed for our loyalty and affection that we owe only to the Almighty. The state is after that. The state is trying to interfere with our worship due our Creator. We need to understand that.
Yeah, and when in Hosea, when God talk about Israel, when they reject Him and choose a king, God specifically say, I hate them, because they did that. That's in Hosea.
Yes.
Yep.
They have erected an idol. They think the king is going to solve their problems instead of me. Now, American Christians do that every single day, and they don't object when the larger culture does it either. Okay? We think, we don't, but Americans as a whole think government supplies their food, government makes sure their food is clean, government keeps the waters running, government keeps our cars on the road, government legislates the prices of things and keeps things reasonable, government's going to cure cancer. Okay? The way that ordinary Americans talk about government, it is a god. They attribute to it God's powers. now with Obamacare,
it's
the
a
government.
religion.
It is very definitely a religion. Very definitely.
If you get a Christian to say you're going to praise, you're going to worship, you're going to pray to Satan, they probably die, get killed, and not do that. But they do that through the government. They will petition, they will praise, they will worship the Satan through government, because that's the fruits of Satan. That's rob, to kill, and destroy. We'll see who have those fruits, and by those fruits will be known. The government have those fruits.
Absolutely, Claudia, you're 100% right. You know, one of the saddest things I have seen, actually I've seen so many sad things on government, but one thing that breaks my heart is one of my favorite charities, Voice of the Martyrs, which is exactly that. It aids the persecuted church throughout the world, okay? One of the saddest things I've seen is when they have to explain to American Christians, and they've done this, I've seen their mailings, I'm on their list, I get them. They explain why in a country that the government has outlawed God's word, they will nonetheless break the law and go in and carry Bibles. Now, think about that. Think about it, that they have to explain to American Christians why this is okay, why, in fact, God calls us to do that. Isn't that astonishing that people idolize the state so much? They are willing to obey it rather than the Great Commission. Go ye into all the world, even where the Satan is prohibiting, the satanic government is prohibiting my word. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, not just the ones that the satanic state says you can.
Even going back to Israel, it's actually against the law to be a Christian. That is public law in Israel.
I don't know about that. You may be right. I haven't read that. It's just I'm always astonished at the love, the idolatry that American Christians have for a socialist government.
Yeah,
like, wow.
They are. Good grief.
I think it's against the law to proselytize.
Right.
That's what it is.
To preach. Yeah. Yeah, you're right, Mike. It's not necessarily against the law to be, but to preach or openly proclaim Christianity.
And effectively, a Messianic Christian there is not accepted much. They are persecuted, and they can even take the aliyah, they call.
Yeah.
If they figure out you are Jew, but you are Christian.
You know, it's a wonderfully complex question, and it's not one I have an answer to. But I would like to find out whether the state has a similar jihad against other religions that it does against Christianity. For instance, we know that Christians are persecuted worldwide. Do Buddhists get persecuted? Do Muslims, other than from the U.S. government, yes, but do Muslims get persecuted in other countries? It seems to me that usually they're accommodated. Okay, why is the satanic state so utterly opposed to Christianity? Why does it do its hardest to stamp it out? I think we can all see why, because it is the absolute enemy, being from the pit of hell. Government is the enemy, the avowed enemy of every Christian and of Jesus Christ. Let's remember, too, who crucified our Lord. Okay? Government, yes, we all put him on that cross. Government pounded home those nails, folks. If you are bowing down to the idol of government, of the state, you are worshiping the very thing that crucified our Lord. God have mercy on you.
Well, even look at I don't want to call them look at the U.S. state and what it's done with its foreign policy to Christians in the Middle East who were living under a quote-unquote tyrant, usually the one that the U.S. state implemented.
Saddam Hussein.
And like Saddam Hussein. And yet these Christians in Syria, let's take Syria for example, the oldest Christian community in the world lived in peace in Syria under the tyrant Assad. And since since the U.S. state has went to war with them, they're obliterated. Look, even in Iraq, the Christians in Iraq could live in peace and harmony. They weren't persecuted at all under the Saddam regime. Now we've gone in there and taken him out, and they're being murdered.
Yes. Isn't that a a shame to all American Christians, especially those who sit there and tell us, now pay your taxes.
Oh, they're all for the war.
They're all for the war.
They want to go in there and kill some more. Let's get in there. So our bombs are Christian bombs, or they don't, when they drop and kill civilians, it doesn't kill Christians? How does that work? Those are really smart bombs.
And what would we, American Christians, say if Iraqi Christians had launched a war here to free us from our tyrant? By the way, I eagerly await this. With the NSA interfering around the world, we are very much become Nazi Germany, and the rest of the world understands this. And I am waiting to see if there are going to be a group of allies to get together that try to free us from our tyrannical government. Now, of course, that's not what they'll actually do. They will simply come in here and try and take us over. But the U.S. government is really ticking off other governments worldwide. I don't know if you saw the latest news on Germany.
Yep.
But Germany's big spy agency has been cooperating with the NSA and has been giving the NSA all kinds of German trade secrets.
Yep.
Okay? Huge scandal in Germany right now. NSA is really asking for it. And we are aggressing against the rest of the world in ways Adolf Hitler didn't dare do. Okay? It is astonishing to me that the rest of the world has not ganged up against us yet.
Yet.
I wonder if they will, yes. And I'm going to be very interested to see whether Americans welcome the destruction of the colossal wickedness on the Potomac River.
I don't see it. I mean, I'm very proud of the German people because they've been very upset. I mean, they're protesting and this and that. Here in the States, I mean, look at Brazil, where Claudio's from. Millions of people, go out in the street and protest their president.
Yes, Dilma.
Here,
oh my.
You
yes.
shoot someone in the back here, a cop shoots someone in the back, and maybe 40 people will show up.
Yes. It's what a shame that the rest of the world shows us up in their outrage at what the NSA is doing.
This is supposed to be the beacon of liberty.
And a lot of that's the war culture. America is the greatest war culture that's probably ever existed. If your country's at war, you have to support anything it does.
Yeah.
And going back to the time of the Civil War, when Lincoln was contemplating attacking the South, Seward was actually against it. The reason he was against it is he thought it would unify the people of America better if Lincoln had just attacked France or England. He thought it would be better to have a war overseas to unify everyone than to have an internal war.
Aren't they still doing that?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's it. It's
Well, I think a big part of it is because, supposedly we're a Christian nation. It's because we see heaven. We want heaven here on earth. Mm-hmm. But we're not from here. No. This isn't our goal. I mean, the Bible tells us we are the strangers.
Yes. We are the strangers. We are to spread the gospel. Nowhere are we commanded to use force against other people. Nowhere are we commanded to force them to support us, to support our missions. Nothing. And yet the U.S. routinely goes around the world bullying, forcing people, subjugating them. This is the most anti-Christian attitude and behavior we could possibly ask. And American Christians who support that sort of thing, I really have to question, are you just babes in the word that you're not able to eat meat, you're still drinking the milk, or are you even truly a Christian?
And it's also internal. I mean, America has some of the most brutal police in the world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And people rah with them,
Yes. It's interesting that you had mentioned that, Mike. I have an article up yesterday on Personal Liberty Digest discussing this very issue and talking about how we need to abolish the police department. And I'd encourage you to go to Personal Liberty Digest. You don't even have to read the article. Just read the comments. It's amazing how many people, despite all the police brutality, amazing how many people out there support the cops to this day.
I have relatives who are like that.
Yeah.
Support,
we're outgunned. I mean, you got Sean Hannity, you got Rush Limbaugh, you got all these pro-statist neocons, you got Fox News. That I even have to play Fox News on my show.
We closed our ears, don't worry.
Well, sometimes it gives us something to talk about, though. That's kind of fun. One of the things, Becky, that you said excuse me, I think it was the last time you were with us that really nailed it home for me was Judges 9.
Yes.
It talks about the cedars. Who will rule you? And I've read that so many times since you brought that up since, over and over and over. And it's just, it makes it so plain to me. Who should rule you, cedars? And we are the cedars.
Yes.
And it's so plain that the government, the state, we want to clear, I think there is a difference between quote-unquote government and the state. The state is the brambles.
Yes, it is. And that parable, for those who aren't familiar with it, the trees get together and they asked different members of their group to rule over them. They asked the grapevine, they asked a couple of the other ones, and the response always is, no, I can't. I'm busy doing productive things. Like the grapevine says, I'm producing my grapes for men's use, and I'm doing something useful. I can't be bothered to be a governor. And the only one who agrees to do it is the worthless bramble. And the Bible's very clear. I don't remember the exact wording, but I think worthless is right there. The worthless bramble, or the bramble is only good for throwing on a fire. And he's the one. Very interesting, too, what the bramble says to them. Come into my shade. Well, of course, when plants go into shade, they die.
Yep.
So it's a wonderful parable in Judges 9. I encourage everybody to read it.
Yeah, it is. And it says, come into our shade. But basically, if you go against us, we'll burn you.
Yes.
And how exact is that with the state?
I don't know if you ever see a climbing plant that is a bramble. When they get in a tree, they go and they cover the tree and then they choke the tree.
Yes, Claudio, wonderful point. Yes, I have seen that. We actually have vines like that in where I grew up, and the same thing. It just strangles a tree after a while. So the bramble, I mean, that is just, as I said, a magnificent parable, and so much of it is applicable, so many details of it applicable to exactly what government does.
Yeah, people want to redeem the government, and you can't redeem Satan. It's just not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. That's why I always advocate abolition. We've got to abolish government. We have to abolish the state in its totality. You have to get rid of the agencies. Have to get rid of the presidency. We need to live free of the state. If you're going to tell me, well, we can reform it, I would ask you, have you reformed cancer?
Well, they tell
reform a volcano.
Yeah. Well, they tell us that the people are the government. Therefore, are the people Satan? Is it just time to leave?
Yeah, I heard a good analogy. They say, "Oh, I'm going to join." That's a quote. I'm not saying that. I'm going to join ISIS to change them from inside. It's the same thing as try to change the government from inside.
Yep.
Exactly. It can't be changed. By the way, almost any reform, these various, we need to change it, we need to improve it type people propose, has already been tried and failed miserably. So again, it's like, if you're not going to learn from history, what are you going to learn from? Your reform will not work. It was tried. In fact, it was done 40 years ago, put through, and it hasn't changed a thing. So the only answer to the evil of the state is abolition. We want nothing to do with the works of darkness. We are children of the light. We come out away from the state, and we live our lives free in the liberty that God gave us.
Yeah, people are trying to get a small government since they start. It was not. You can't have a small government as in the beginning, and even from there they grew. So
that's right.
It didn't work.
It's like saying I want to have a small cancer. No, I don't. I don't want any cancer at all.
None.
Governments are cute when they start, but when they grow, they're like a pet alligator.
Well, look at our own. The great experiment.
Something else. You start looking back at Washington's administration. Remember, we had the Whiskey Rebellion during the Washington administration.
Yep.
So even when the U.S. government was as small as it could be, terrible things were going on. Yep. Look at the Louisiana Purchase. Look at the way that the American Indians were treated. By the way, did you all know that Hitler got his idea for concentration camps from the U.S. government's reservations for Indians?
I've read that, yep.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't know about Eisenhower's concentration camps in Europe during World War II.
Yes.
We're out of time. Becky, thank you so much. Please come back when you have time to do it again, and you're just wonderful. We really appreciate you.
I very much enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure and a privilege, Josh. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Claudio.
Thank you.
And we just want to leave the folks with this from Isaiah: learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. That is our job. Becky Akers, thank you so much. We're
Thank you.
Looking forward to talking to you again. Have a good day.
That sounds fantastic. Bye-bye.
Bye.